जय निताई गौर प्रेमानंदे। Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Verse 8. Do you do the repeating of the verse here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dharma Swanustita Pumsam Dharma Sanustita Pumsam Dharma Sanustita Pumsam Dharma Swanustita Pumsam Vishvaksena Kathasu Ya Vishvaksena Kathasu Ya Vishvaksena Kathasu Ya Vishvaksena Kathasu Ya Notpadayet Yadi Ratim Notpadayet Yadi Ratim Notpadayet Yadi Ratim Notpadayet Yadi Ratim Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam Dharma Swanustita Pumsam Dharma Swanustita Pumsam Vishvaksena Kathasuya Vishvaksena Kathasuya Notpadayet Yadiratim Notpadayet Yadiratim Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam
Dharmasvanushtita
Pumsam
Vishvakshena Katasuyaha Notpadayet Yadiratim Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam
Dharma. Vas-y.
Tu es plus aîné.
Bon. Dharmasvanustita Pumsam Vishvaksena Katasuya Notpadayet Rati Ratim Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam
Dharmasvanushtita Pumsam Vishvakshena Kathasuyaha Notpadayet Yadiratim Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam
Mataji's.
Dharmasvanustita Pumsam Vishvaksena Kathasuya Notpadayet Yadiratim Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam
Dharmasvanustita
Pumsam
Vishvaksena Kathasuya Notpadayet Yadiratim Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam
Dharma Occupation.
Occupation.
Svanustitaha.
Svanustitaha.
Executed in terms of one's own position.
Executed in terms of one's own position.
Pumsam.
Pumsam.
Of humankind.
Of humankind.
Vishvaksena.
Vishvaksena.
The personality of Godhead.
The personality of Godhead.
Plenary portion.
Plenary portion.
Gathasu.
Gathasu.
In the message of.
In the message of.
Yaha.
Yaha.
What is.
What is.
Na.
Na.
Not.
Not.
Utpadayet.
Utpadayet.
Does produce.
Does produce.
Yadi.
Yadi.
If.
If.
Ratim.
Ratim.
Attraction.
Attraction.
Shramaha.
Shramaha.
Useless labor.
Useless labor.
Eva.
Eva.
Only.
Only.
He. Certainly.
Certainly.
Kevalam.
Kevalam.
Entirely.
Entirely.
Translation and purport given by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki. Translation. The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. Purport. There are different occupational activities in terms of man's different conceptions of life. To the gross materialist who cannot see anything beyond the gross material body, there is nothing beyond the senses. Therefore, his occupational activities are limited to concentrated and extended selfishness. Concentrated selfishness centers around the personal body. This is generally seen amongst the lower animals. Extended selfishness is manifested in human society and centers around the family, society, community, nation, and world, with a view to gross bodily comfort. Above these gross materialists are the mental speculators, who hover aloft in the mental spheres, and their occupational duties involve making poetry and philosophy, or propagating some ism with the same aim of selfishness limited to the body and the mind. But above the body and mind is the dormant spirit soul, whose absence from the body makes the whole range of bodily and mental selfishness completely null and void. But less intelligent people have no information of the needs of the spirit soul. Because foolish people have no information of the soul and how it is beyond the purview of the body and mind, they are not satisfied in the performance of their occupational duties. The question of the satisfaction of the self is raised herein. The self is beyond the gross body and subtle mind. He is the potent active principle of the body and mind. Without knowing the need of the dormant soul, one cannot be happy simply with emolument of the body and mind. The body and mind are but superfluous outer coverings of the spirit soul. The spirit soul's needs must be fulfilled. Simply by cleansing the cage of the bird, one does not satisfy the bird. One must actually know the needs of the bird himself. The need of the spirit soul is that he wants to get out of the limited sphere of material bondage and fulfill his desire for complete freedom. He wants to get out of the covered walls of the greater universe. He wants to see the free light and the spirit. That complete freedom is achieved when he meets the complete spirit, the personality of Godhead. There is a dormant affection for God within everyone. Spiritual existence is manifested through the gross body and mind in the form of perverted affection for the gross and subtle matter. Therefore, we have to engage ourselves in occupational engagements that will evoke our divine consciousness. This is possible only by hearing and chanting the divine activities of the Supreme Lord, and any occupational activity which does not help one to achieve attachment. Jai Shri Shri Radha Govinda Madhav Ki Jai, Shri Krishna Balaram Ki Jai, Shri Shri Govinda Ki Jai. This is possible only by hearing and chanting the divine activities of the Supreme Lord, and any occupational activity which does not help one to achieve attachment for hearing and chanting the transcendental message of Godhead is said herein to be simply a waste of time. This is because other occupational duties, whatever ism they may belong to, cannot give liberation to the soul. Even the activities of the Salvationists are considered to be useless because of their failure to pick up the fountainhead of all liberties. The gross materialist can practically see that his material gain is limited only to time and space, either in this world or in the other. Even if he goes up to the Swargaloka, he will find no permanent abode for his hankering soul. The hankering soul must be satisfied by the perfect scientific process of perfect devotional service. Om Gnanitmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnanebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Dharma sanustitha pumsam vishvakshena kathasuya notpadayat yadiratim shrama eva hi kevalam. The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. So Hare Krishna everyone. Firstly I'd like to give ask for the blessings of all the devotees here, especially the seniors. A bit nerve-wracking. Prabhupada disciples I know here as well in Nimai Pradhan, and obviously we have Mother Vishaka here with us. I think it's my first time giving class in front of Mother Vishaka, which is, interesting. So we are continuing in this series of questions and answers from Canto 1, Chapter 1 to Chapter 2. We saw at the end of Chapter 1, the sages at Naimisharanya, they're asking key questions, 6 questions in particular, about the human condition and how to attain perfection. The 6 the questions of the sages, as they call it. And so now we can see that Sutta Goswami is responding to those answers to those 6 questions. Actually, the rest of the Bhagavatam basically is answering those very first 6 questions, and then obviously Sutta Goswami will speak for the next 11 and a half, 12 cantos, from this point onwards. So here, the sages, they are obviously from yesterday we saw when Mother Vishaka was giving the class today, Sutta Goswami is actually talking about what is the perfection for humanity in general. And here Sutta Goswami is mentioning how one has to make sure that whatever occupational activities one is performing, they have to develop some attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. Otherwise there is so much useless labor. Shrama eva hi kevalam. And it's interesting here that first Sutta Goswami is actually clarifying here that he's saying personality of Godhead. So not just any form of God, because we know that there is God in the form of his Brahman, his energy. There's God in terms of his localized aspect as Paramatma in our heart. But here he's specifically clarifying is the personality of Godhead. So Sutta Goswami is being very, very specific here. This verse is also very pertinent in this day and age. When ISKCON was first established by Srila Prabhupada, 99% of the ISKCON membership were temple devotees. There were mainly brahmacharis, brahmacharinis, or even if there were couples, there were couples tending to live in the temple. So in one sense, this would be very easy to kind of imbibe and resonate with. Like, okay, yes, whatever we do has to like, be aligned with the message of Krishna. Now we're living in an age where 99%, if not more, of the ISKCON Yatra is actually grihastas living out there in the material world, in the rat race, dealing with the material energy, with whatever it brings. And only a tiny percentage is actually living in the ashram now. So therefore, there needs to be a bit of a discussion here. And I think this will be something which I think will be very much a dialogue that will be taking place over many years now, of how does one balance that dichotomy between work in a, you know, the karmic sense, and bhakti. If you're lucky, you can like do a certain work which can lend itself to your bhakti, like we have in this temple, Lochananda Prabhu, Gandhavika Mataji and young Sangeeta, who are serving in the temple. So in one sense, their work and is very much aligned with their bhakti. But a lot of people may not have that privilege. So how does one do that? And also, how does one not let the work end up becoming dominant over the bhakti? It is such a pertinent thing now. I mean, I think in many yatras, I'm sure even, including our manner as well, like that is very much something that people have to contend with. Some people may say, look, we have to be practical. There's nothing wrong with going out there and, in English we say, killing it in the material world. You know, get that high-powered career in the corporate sphere. You know, make that lots of money, because then you can use it to fund the movement. Then there are other, side of the argument is that, no, don't sell your soul. Look, whatever's going out there, that society is not going to last anyway. It's going to come to a head. Use your talents and your ability in Krishna's service, right? So there is definitely something to be said about that at the moment. Anyway, so Srila Prabhupada, he's mentioning here about occupational duties. So in the purport, Prabhupada mentions that on one level, it's the gross level, which is where one is doing the occupational duties to fulfill their sense gratification, their fruitive needs. And in a class that Prabhupada gave on this verse, Prabhupada actually said that one can relate this to karma yoga. Then the next level up from that is the more subtle level. This is where one is looking at isms, different types of isms, different types of philosophy and poetry and things like that. And Prabhupada relates this to Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga is very much a yoga of the mind, you know. It's more cerebral in nature. And then above all that, of course, is the spiritual aspect. So you got the karma yoga, Jnana Yoga, and then you got the spiritual aspect, which can be divided into three types: the Brahman, the Paramatma, and the Bhagavan. Now there is another way of looking at this as well, that when Prabhupada is talking about these different levels of occupational duties, it also relates to the Panchakosha. Has anyone here heard of the Panchakosha? Okay, so this is from Bhagavad Gita chapter 13, verse 3. It's related to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know the psychological concept, Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Okay, so basically, on one level, you have Annamaya. Annamaya is basically fulfilling your senses, your eating, sleeping, mating, defending. And a lot of what we do in life will be related to this. The animals are in this level. Also amongst humanity, this level relates to the Varnas as well. So for example, Sudras would be very much on that bodily platform, working in that Annamaya field, like sense activities, whether it's to do with like food and visuals and like, things that kind of activate the senses. So that's very much on the Annamaya platform. Then you got Pranamaya platform. Pranamaya platform is going beyond the senses. You're aware of your existence and survival. So whatever occupational duties you do is to propagate your survival. It requires a bit more long-sightedness, right? This is actually interesting. It relates to the Varna of the Vaishyas, because Vaishyas are all about preservation and survival and prospering. Then above that, you've got Jnanamaya. Jnanamaya, or you can also call it Manamaya. This is the level where now you've gone beyond survival. You're now looking at what are the laws that govern this world that I live in, and how do I master and administer those laws and concepts by which this world and society functions. So this is related to the Kshatriyas, the administrators, the rulers. And then above that, you've got Vigyanmaya. Vigyanmaya is basically, now you're looking at the world. You acknowledge that there is something different between me as a person, as a soul, and the matter with which I'm dealing with in this world. So this is called Vigyanmaya. So the Brahmanas are dealing with the difference between soul and matter. So these are the kind of four main levels, but there is one level above all this, which is called Anandamaya. Ananda means bliss, where you're attaining like true bliss of the soul, of full kind of like soul consciousness. In the psychology, they talk about self-actualization, which is kind of related to this. So you can see that in just this one paragraph, when Prabhupada is talking about the different levels of occupational duties, one can easily see how it's related to the 5 levels of the Panchakosha. But the whole point is that the 4 first levels, Annamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya and Vigyanmaya, they are all actually useless if they do not have Anandamaya underpinning them all. Sometimes even we see that institutions that are just based on Pranamaya, especially spiritual institutions, right, if they can look quite good externally because it looks like there's a lot of prosperity, a lot of people, a lot of like resources, facilities. But if it's not underpinned by that bhakti, by the Anandamaya, then eventually, give it time, it will collapse. So this is very important for us to understand, which is why Krishna has given us the occupational devotees related to what kind of psychophysical nature we're part of. We know in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Chatur Vrandam Maya Shreshta Guna Karma Vibhagasa. Every single one of us has got a certain guna and a karma, a quality and a sort of work that we incline towards, which can help us to kind of lead life in a more productive way. Interesting enough though, nowadays there is especially in I suppose the kind of zeitgeist of ISKCON, there is a lot of talk now about natures. What is my nature? How can I align my lifestyle and my work in line with my nature so I can lead a more fulfilling life? And there is a lot to be said about this. There's a famous quote by Tamal Krishna Maharaj who said, the reason why people have left the movement in the past is not actually because of fall downs. It's not because they got blown out by other devotees. It's definitely not because of Srila Prabhupada. We often meet devotees, isn't it? You know, like who used to be part of ISKCON on Sankirtan, who are no longer with ISKCON, but then they'll say they still love Prabhupada, right? So it's not because of that. Actually, it's because Maharaj said they have not been situated properly in their duties, which is why Srila Prabhupada said 50% of my work needs to be done, needs to be established, which is establishing Varnashram. Interestingly, Prabhupada did not talk about Varnashram for the first few years when he went to America. It was just very much about hearing, chanting, you know, like the kind of basics. It was only after a certain point when Prabhupada saw people were kind of like going off the rails, they realized that they need some sort of material situation to be situated so they can peacefully do their material lives. Then this whole notion of the 4 Varnas comes in. And now obviously that's a big thing. Recently we had Urmila Mataji at the manor giving workshops on Korea Dharma, which is amazing, by the way. She's done a book on it. And I know there's a lot of other talks in ISKCON and devotees writing books about how to kind of work according to our nature. Sometimes we find that we're mismatched with whatever service we're doing, etc., etc. There is a risk, however, here that once we find our nature, and you know, it is a great feeling to now finally find your nature and your work and it's all aligning perfectly. It's like, wow, that's amazing. But there is also, one cannot forget about the Krishna conscious aspect as well, because it could be a very euphoric feeling to find your thing finally and just get caught up with that. one has to understand that even our nature is actually coming from Krishna. And even those things in our nature which we like are actually elements of Krishna that we're actually hanging on to. There are 6 opulences that Krishna possesses: Aishwarya, Virya, Yasa, Shri, Jnana, Vairagya. Interestingly, the different varnas, they gravitate towards different combinations of these qualities. So for example, if you're a Vaishya nature, you'd gravitate towards Aishwarya, which is power and control. I know they call it opulence, but it's actually also related to power and control. If you're a Kshatriya, you'd gravitate towards Yasa and Vir. Yasa means fame, but not fame in a trivial way. It's fame for merit, fame for being honorable.
Honor.
Yeah, honor. And Kshatriyas are very big on honor. And also Virya, which is strength. That could be mental strength, physical strength, pushing yourself more and more for a higher cause. Then you've got the Sudras. They gravitate towards Shri. Shri means beauty. It means not just that you may be beautiful yourself, but it might be that you gravitate towards beauty, or you're gravitating towards aesthetics, form, functionality. So all those kind of occupation that related to it could be even like making the roadworks effective and nice and smooth. It could be like, you know, designing, architecture, form. It's basically to do with form and functionality. If you're gravitating towards such things, then that's related to Shri, which corresponds with the Sudra. And then of course you've got Brahmanas who gravitate towards Gyan and Vairagya, knowledge and renunciation. So you can see here that even our natures are actually borrowing from Krishna, because Krishna has all these natures in full. So when we do establish ourselves in our occupational duties, as Srila Prabhupada said, we have to make sure that we're also giving homage to who we're getting these qualities from. You know, these gifts that we discover in our Krishna consciousness. So this is very, very important, that when we're doing occupational devotees, it has to be based on how it's going to help us to develop our Krishna consciousness. Actually, the varnashram is not spiritual in itself. Well, in one sense you can argue it is, because it's in the spiritual world as well. But on a material level, it is a material construct. But it's the best system for us to peacefully practice Krishna consciousness. We cannot take that away. If we take that away, if we take Krishna out of varnashram, what is the difference between us and karma kandis? Because that's what they do, right? They take Krishna out, they take the bhakti out, and then it just becomes a fruitive thing, right? Yesterday in Vishaka Mataji's purport, Prabhupada talks about pravritti and nivritti. There's actually different types of varnashram. There's a type of varnashram which is called Vedic varnashram, which is what the karmakandis practice. You know, like doing your duty for some material reward, material elevation. This is varnashram geared towards pravritti, progressive development in your material life. Now, pravritti generally means something positive, but in this sense, is actually, Prabhupada is saying it's negative, because it's going to entangle you more in the material world. What we're practicing is called Devi Varnashram, which is Varnashram Nivritti, which is to disconnect you from the material world, right? So therefore, Devi means that, you know, you're doing Varnashram for Krishna, for the sake of attaching more with Krishna, which is why later on in this chapter as well, we'll see, actually, yeah, it's literally in this chapter in a few verses. You'll probably see this next week. Sutta Goswami talks about how the Varnashram system is there for samsiddhir haritoshanam, which means that it's simply there for the satisfaction of Krishna. If you do this occupational devotees without that bhakti, at best, you will be a karma kandi. At best. At worst, you will degrade. We see the modern caste system in India, how it's been practiced over the last few hundred years. It is very oppressive, you know. So we have to be very careful. And at some point, that varnashram itself will then eventually collapse anyway. So that is something to be very, very cautious about. And also, another thing as well, when you take Krishna out of the Varnashram system, when you do not have the Krishna conscious philosophy to guide you, even if you're in your Varna, even if you're in your right occupational duties, you will not only degrade, you'll go down the modes of nature, and then eventually the very purpose for why you were doing what you were doing will get flipped on its head. Let me explain. The different Varnas, your different occupational duties have got different purposes. So for example, if you're a Brahmana, your purpose in society is to fight ignorance. Every Varna has to fight something. So Brahmana has to fight ignorance. If you're a Kshatriya, you fight infringement. Infringement means exploitation of others. Right? When you see others getting oppressed, exploited, used, a Kshatriya's duty, because the Kshatriya are there to protect, right? I think it's Kshatriya. Shat means harm. Triya comes from Trayate, which means to free from harm, right? So that's actually literally where the word Kshatriya comes from, right? So Kshatriya is to fight infringement. Vaishya is to fight insufficiency. And then Sudras are there to fight indolence, which means lethargy, laziness, right? What happens though is if you're in your Varna, but you're not situated in Krishna consciousness, you go down the modes, and then those very Varnas end up doing the opposite. So Brahmanas, instead of fighting ignorance, they end up promoting ignorance in society. So you get a lot of different philosophies coming through in the world. Even now, I'm sure there are a lot of philosophies pervading academia and politics and governance and society, which is making people confused about who they are and what is the right way to go. And it can actually, I mean, on one level, it can actually lead to depression, anxiety, dissatisfaction. It can, and on a very, very gross level, it can even lead to actually, destruction of societies. We're talking like mass, genocide, killings, all that kind of stuff. So, like the philosophies that we propagate in society, taken to an extreme, who knows where they can go? And we see this throughout history, right? So Brahmanas, they end up actually promoting ignorance. Kshatriyas, instead of protecting, fighting infringement, they end up becoming the most brutal out of all the different Varnas. Again, history shows us, with the empires that have happened in Kali Yuga, the invasions, the colonialisms, all these things, we don't need to go to a history lesson, but we can see when Kshatriyas are wrongly situated but in power, what can happen in society. Vaishyas, instead of fighting insufficiency, they might end up actually causing more exploitation. It's interesting, different times in Kali Yuga, you'll find the different Varnas, they rise and some become more dominant. Brahmanical culture is meant to be the one that is meant to be the dominant ethos. But that kind of got ruined at the dawn of Kali Yuga with Shringi, the son of Shamika Rishi. When he then, when he insulted Parikshit Maharaj, Prabhupada says that's when the Brahminical, power started to decline. Then the Kshatriyas became the dominant culture in the world. We can see now over the last, hundreds of years, the Kshatriyas have kind of gone down. Because, you use and abuse your privilege, your power, it goes down. Now we can see in the world, the Vaishyas are coming up. Again, if they're not situated properly, it will cause a lot of issues. They'll squeeze and squeeze more out of the population. You'll see this even on a practical level. In fact, this is amazing actually, how Prabhupada is obviously Prabhupada is amazing. The things that Prabhupada has said, right? And Prabhupada is talking about this stuff 5 decades ago now, right? Over 5 decades ago. There are things that Prabhupada says which we are now seeing in society playing out, very accurately. Even for example, Prabhupada talked about we have to live off the land. If you work in the modern industrialized society, you're going to get squeezed. I'm saying the word squeezed. Prabhupada, used other words. You're going to get squeezed, more work for less pay. We can see that as time goes on, how hard it is now to live. the husband and the wife can both work very hard and they still find it difficult to maintain a house. Just a house with kids, right? Just go back 30 years, 20 years maybe. No, 30 years, let's be honest. Let's say 30 years ago, a man could work, not even like a high-powered job, just a normal job, have a house with the wife and the kids, right? That's just within our century. And it's gone like, it's getting squeezed more. Prabhupada said that. Prabhupada said that you'll find the work hours are going to increase more, right? Work hours are going to increase more. You have less time to do your Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada said, we have to now create self-sufficient lifestyles, more natural lifestyles. Prabhupada even said, but the governments are, the society are so like bent upon that they'll even tax everything more and more. So it'll be hard for you to even like go off the grid and live like that as well. So again, all these things we see happening as well now. Now let's be very honest. This is not having a go at the Vaishya dominant culture, because like we said before, every Varna, when it's situated properly, is amazing. In fact, one senior devotee said to me, who's done a lot of research in Varnashram, that Vaishyas, when they're situated properly, can be the sweetest of all the 4 Varnas. You know, they can be the sweetest. But when they're not situated, this can happen. We haven't got to the stage where Sudras have become the dominant culture in society.
We had that.
Huh?
We had that recently. Communism and socialism.
That's true, yeah. So there are certain governmental systems that lend themselves to Varnas. So communism is very much geared towards Sudra, capitalism towards Vaishya, monarchy towards Kshatriyas. Yeah. Brahmanas don't really fall into that. I mean, because Brahmanas can thrive in anarchy as well, because Brahmanas are very independent type people. They're at least kind of connected with the material thing, you know? They're a bit more ethereal, but they're very much needed in society as well. Anyway, so the point is, occupational duties themselves is not sufficient. Sometimes we see this as well, especially for those who come from Indian background. You know, when they, especially, you know, those who come and become devotees and you've got family and friends, and they'll say, just do your dharma, why are you doing all this bhakti? And one of the favorite verses they always recite is chapter 2, verse 47. Karmani eviteke raste ma felishu kadachin. Just do your duty. That's fine, do your duty, but not just do your duty, you have to also do the next part, which is actually do it under Krishna's shelter in the aim of actually going towards Krishna. So that's very, very interesting. We have to make sure that we are focusing on Krishna. Otherwise, this whole thing will collapse and will bring us back to misery again. And that means going by the philosophy. Shruti Shmiti Puranadi Pancharatra Vidim Vina Ekantiki Harer Bhakti Utpataiva Kalpate. If one doesn't follow the scriptures like the Shruti scriptures, the Smriti and the Puranas, then it will simply cause Utpataiva Kalpate, simply cause disturbance in society, which is what we're seeing now. So we have to lean it on the tattva that Krishna has given us, that Srila Prabhupada has given us. You know, even if you're, let's say, in the Varnashram and you're not like directly in Bhakti Yoga, at least you can offer it to Krishna. Krishna himself says in the Padma Purana, Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Akama sarva kamo va. Whether you have no akama, no desires, or sarva kamo va, or all kinds of desires, still you go to Krishna. Still. But now here's the thing. The next part of that verse is Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajita Purusham Param. Which means, but whilst you're coming to Krishna with your desires, with your duties, with your occupation, at the same time intensify your practice towards me. Intensify your bhakti. So it's one thing, we can go to Krishna for material things. We can find our occupational duty, we can be situated in our occupational duty, but alongside, we have to intensify our practice towards Krishna. Better you do that, even if your occupational duty gets compromised. even if your occupation, it's better to actually do your bhakti. In fact, actually, there's a quote, there's a verse. Tyaktva sadharmam charanam bhajam. I can't remember the full one, but I'm sure some of you know this. Tyaktva sadharmam charanam bhajam hare. Anyway, but it's from Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 5, verse 17. It's said that it's better to perform devotional service than just doing your occupational duty. Both are obviously good. It's better to perform your devotional service imperfectly than do your occupational duty perfectly. You know what I mean? So you could be someone who's doing the occupational duty really, really well, like some very high-level accomplished materialist. That is not as desirable as a bhakta who's doing their devotional service not brilliantly. That it's still better to be that bhakta. Of course, we want to do our devotional service really nicely, obviously, but that's still better. And we have examples of this in the Ramayana. Oh, sorry, you have to finish now.
No.
Oh.
You want questions after?
Oh, I'll finish this point and then I'll go into questions, yeah. There is one example in the Ramayana of Jatayu. Has anyone heard of Jatayu here? So he was a famous vulture, and you know, he did his devotional service because when Ravana was kidnapping Sita and taking Sita away, she actually screamed like to Jatayu, 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 please tell my husband that Ravana has taken me away, you know, while he's taken up in the chariot. Jatayu, being a devotee of Lord Ram, was like, absolutely, in fact, no, I'm going to do something even better. I'm going to try and actually go and fight with Ravana to rescue Sita for my Lord. And so Jatayu had a terrific fight with Ravana, and you know, he was old by this time. He was, you know, he was a lot more senior. They were fighting, and he gave a good fight, actually. You know, Ravana did get, like, you know, initially beaten, but then Ravana, he's younger, he's got his mystic demonic powers and stuff, so he then got more powerful. He ended up beating Jatayu, chopped his wings off, he fell, eventually he died. So one can say materially, he didn't succeed in his devotional mission. One can say that. But the fact that he endeavored made all the difference. At the end of his life, Lord Ram and Lakshman came to him. Lord Ram lifted Jatayu's head in his lap and looked at him whilst Jatayu was chanting Lord Ram's name. And Lord Ram himself performed the funeral rites for Jatayu, just like a son does for their father. What kind of benediction is that? Imagine you get the Lord himself looking at you with your head in his lap, and then he performs your last rites, and you know that you're going to go back to God after that. And this is after, quote unquote, failing in his service. You know what I mean? So we see that there is no loss if you're doing your bhakti, even if your occupational duty, even if it's not perfect, as opposed to someone just doing occupational duty perfectly. And we see examples of that as well. Okay, I'll pause here. Yes, any comments, corrections, questions? Yes, Prabhuji?
You just touched upon the degradation of the Varnas a little bit. So I thought about a seminar of Ravindra Swarup, if you know him.
Yeah.
Our Ravindra Swarup, I think from 1992 or something, about Varnashram, where he begins by giving a short history of the degradation of the Varnas in Europe. And he basically takes 500 years from now, starting with the Reformation, with Martin Luther, not the Martin Luther King, but the
German Martin,
yeah, the monk,
yes.
where from Catholicism came Protestants. So the first degradation is from the top. He says the Brahmanas, or the priesthood, or the clergy, as we say. Then the next one you already mentioned a little bit, the revolution. The Kshatriyas, the kings, became degraded. So the Vaishyas made a revolution, but then he mentions the third fall down, where the Shudras made a revolution, the communists, and also maybe the National Socialists in Germany. So the Shudras taking over government. So and now that you mentioned that now the Vaishyas seem to come up, and he also mentions that now the Vaishyas are coming up again. You know, that he's in America, 5% of the population have 95% of the riches, which is not balanced.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then he mentions just one last thing, that because we are supposed to get into Varnashram Dharma and find out what is our duty, but then he says in that seminar that because of history, because of our experience and other things, we haven't seen real Brahmanas, we haven't seen real Kshatriyas, we haven't even seen real Vaishyas, and maybe even Shudras. So we don't have examples, which is a big difficulty for us. And that's why Prabhupada wanted to create especially Brahmanas and maybe Vaishyas.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point.
It's a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it says Galo Sudra Sambhava, that, you know, in this age we're all Sudras. And most people see it as like a, you know, like, okay, that's like, you know, to humble us. Like, you know, actually, I can't remember who it was. I might have been Urmila Mataji or someone, also like one of these scholars. They mentioned actually that, actually no, that's actually an aspirational goal. Because even to be a Sudra in this age is actually a very like, you know, it's a very like cultured position to be in. You know, so saying that in Kali Yuga, like, you know, we can all aspire to be Sudras. Like, it's aspirational for us that we can have that privilege of being a Sudra, like proper Sudra. Obviously, then within that, there may be certain inclinations towards Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. But whether we can be the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas of the Vedic times, I don't know. We could be like shadow Brahmanas, shadow Kshatriyas, in the sense that we have certain elements of what it means to be a Brahmana and Kshatriya, and use that in our execution of our duties. But whether we can have that full-on Brahman Tejas, like the olden days where, you know, these like great rishis that could just do amazing things and, like, you know, through their sound vibration kill like King Vena and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if our Brahmanas of this age will come to that standard, you know, of that level of potency, you know. Anyway, yes, but nonetheless, yeah, absolutely. And the Varnashram, it's universal, like you said, European culture, history. You can see Varnashram playing out. It's not just something in India or whatever. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. The more better you get, you can even tell people's Varna. Those who are really expert, they can tell people's Varna just by the way they look, the way they talk. You know, it's a very holistic thing. You know, your nimitta, the facial features, the way you walk, the way you behave, everything can kind of tell you a lot. We just have to become very good at it.
At least if you're more than Shudra, at least you shouldn't get a paycheck. If you get a paycheck, if you are an employee, you're Shudra.
Yeah.
That's one thing, way of judging also. You have to be economically independent, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which nobody is nowadays. Everybody gets a paycheck.
Yeah.
Even the king. You know, the King of England, he gets a paycheck.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So we have to, that's why we have to make sure it's dovetailed to Krishna consciousness. And I'll just finish with one thing. We talked a lot about occupational devotees, but like Prabhupada said, they have to get us to being attracted to the message of Krishna. And ultimately, these things are there to help to keep us at peace, so that we can then access real spiritual ecstasy, real spiritual madness. You know, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, when he heard the Hare Krishna mantra, he said to Ishwar Puri, Kiba mantra dile goshai, kiba tana baal, like, what kind of mantra have you given me? What kind of strength does it have? Japite mantra korile pagal, which means this mantra, I'm doing more japa of it, I'm chanting it more and more, and it's making me mad. Transcendental madness. That is the aim of the Hare Krishna movement. To actually become transcendentally mad, to become in love with Krishna. So that should be our constant barometer, our focus, whatever service we're doing, whatever projects we're involved in, how we're living our life. Is it making us fall in love with Krishna more and more? Okay, so I've been told here, breakfast is at 8:45, so I'm going to finish here. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
There's one point I've been thinking about. This is a very interesting subject for me. Once you start talking about rights, which is a big thing, right?
Rights.
Rights.
Oh, rights of people.
Talk about rights all the
Yeah.
time. What are my rights? Human rights. Once you talk about rights, it's because you're not doing your duty.
Yeah.
Because rights means somebody else has to do their duty to me,
Yeah.
but I'm not doing my duty.
Yeah.
But the Krishna conscious culture is mainly based on doing our duty, right?
Mm.
Whereas now it's been turned around.
Yeah.
Because nobody is doing their duties, they are very concerned about their rights.
Yeah.
But what right do you have if you're not doing it?
Absolutely. And if you do, Sachinanda Maharaj says, if you do your dharma will look after you anyway. You wouldn't have to talk about rights so much.
You have your right to perform your duty.
Yeah.
That's your right.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. Yeah.
Nobody talks about this.
Yeah.
You're one of the few.
Yeah. We have to now, I feel.
Yeah, it's very important.